Come close to the fire, and let me tell you of a man who was born to destroy a civilization and chose instead to become its emperor. His grandfather had shattered kingdoms across half the earth, leaving ash and silence wherever his horsemen rode. But this grandson looked at a broken, conquered land and saw something his grandfather never had. He saw a throne worth sitting upon. He built a capital city from nothing, where a wide-eyed traveler from far Venice would one day gasp at wonders beyond imagining. He commanded the largest empire that had ever existed on the face of the earth. And yet, in his final years, he lost nearly everyone he loved, and no feast, no wine could ever fill the emptiness left behind. His name was Kublai Khan, and this is the whole of his story, the boy of the steppe who became the son of heaven. Sit back and let the fire burn low, as we begin where every great Mongol story begins, with his grandfather. He was born in the year 1215 on the vast grasslands of Mongolia into a family already remaking the world. His grandfather was Genghis Khan, the man who had united the warring tribes of the steppe and turned them into an unstoppable army. His father was Tolui, the youngest of Genghis Khan's 4 sons and a formidable general in his own right. The boy, Kublai, grew up surrounded by war councils, captured treasures, and stories of impossible conquests. He learned to ride before he could properly walk, and to hunt before he had learned his letters. But unlike so many of his kin, young Kublai showed an early curiosity about the settled world beyond the grass. While his cousins dreamed only of raiding and glory, Kublai wondered what it might mean to actually govern a conquered land. It was a strange curiosity for a Mongol prince, and it would shape everything that followed. By the time Kublai was a young man, his grandfather Genghis Khan was gone, but his empire remained vast beyond belief. It stretched from the Pacific coast of China to the gates of Europe, the largest connected empire the world had ever seen. Genghis Khan had divided his conquests among his sons and grandsons, each ruling a portion called a khanate. Kublai's uncle Urgidei became the great Khan first, ruling from a new capital called Karakoram. Then came Kublai's own brother, the stern and disciplined Mengke, who rose to become great Khan of it all. Mengke trusted his younger brother Kublai deeply and gave him a task no ordinary Mongol prince had ever received. He gave him command over the newly conquered lands of northern China, telling him simply, "Go and govern them." It was an assignment that would change Kublai forever and set him apart from every Mongol prince who came before him. Most Mongols saw conquered China as a place to plunder, then abandon, letting the grasslands reclaim the farmland. Kublai saw something different. He saw a land of staggering wealth, if only someone would learn to govern it wisely. He began gathering Chinese scholars and advisors around him, men his own people viewed with deep suspicion. He studied Confucian philosophy, Chinese governance, even the delicate art of Chinese court ceremony. His own Mongol kinsmen whispered that Kublai was going soft, becoming more Chinese than Mongol. But Kublai understood something his critics did not. An empire built only on raiding could never truly last. He lowered crushing taxes, protected farmland from careless destruction, and let local officials keep their posts. Slowly, his corner of northern China began to prosper, while the rest of the empire still ruled by fear and fire. Word of his success reached his brother the Great Khan, and Kublai was given an even greater task: conquest. In the year 1253, Mengke ordered Kublai south to conquer the mountain kingdom of Dali in what is now Yunnan. It was a brutal, difficult campaign through unfamiliar jungles and impossibly steep terrain. Yet Kublai proved himself not just a thoughtful governor, but a genuinely capable commander in the field. When Dali's capital finally fell, Kublai gave an order that stunned his own generals to silence. No massacre, no burning. He ordered his soldiers to spare the population of the conquered city. It was almost unheard of. A Mongol prince choosing mercy over the terror his grandfather had always used as a weapon. Dali became a loyal, peaceful territory almost overnight, proving something radical. Kindness could conquer as well as fire. Kublai returned north with a growing reputation, and an even larger prize now waiting on the horizon. South of the Mongol lands lay the greatest prize of all, the Southern Song Empire, wealthy, ancient, and fiercely proud. The Song had ruled southern China for centuries, protected by great rivers, walled cities, and stubborn resistance. Mengke himself decided to lead the invasion personally, splitting his forces across multiple fronts. Kublai was given command of one great army, ordered to strike deep into Song territory from the north. The Song fought back with a weapon the Mongols had never truly mastered: water, ships, and endless walled cities. Every fortress taken cost months. Every river crossing came at a terrible price in Mongol lives. The war dragged on year after year, as the wealthy Song Empire proved far harder to break than anyone expected. And then, in the middle of this long and grinding war, terrible news arrived from far to the west. In the summer of 1259, while personally besieging a stubborn fortress called Diaroyu, the great Khan Mengke fell ill. Some say it was disease that swept the camp. Others whispered of a wound taken during the siege itself. Whatever the cause, within days, Mengke, great Khan of the Mongol Empire, was dead. The news raced across the empire faster than any army could march, and it landed on Kublai like a thunderclap. He was still deep in enemy territory, still fighting the Song, when the succession crisis began to unfold. For a great Khan does not simply pass his title to a son. He must be chosen by a grand council of Mongol nobles. And far away, in the old capital of Karakoram, Kublai's younger brother Arik Berk was already gathering support. Arik Berk was the favorite of the old guard, the traditionalists who distrusted Kublai's fondness for China. Two brothers, one throne, and an empire about to tear itself apart from within. Kublai made a swift, decisive choice. He abandoned the Song campaign and raced north to secure his claim. In the spring of 1260, at his own power base in the north, Kublai convened his own council and declared himself Great Khan. But far away in Karakoram, Arik Berk held his own council and was proclaimed Great Khan as well. Two great Khans now claimed the same throne. The only way to settle it was the oldest way the Mongols knew: war. It was a bitter, painful conflict, cousin fighting cousin, tribe turning against tribe across the heartland of the empire. Kublai held a crucial advantage. He controlled the rich farmland of northern China and its endless supplies of grain. Arik Berk, holding the old capital, found his warriors slowly starving on the harsh, resource-poor steppe. Year by year, battle by battle, Kublai's superior resources ground his brother's rebellion down to nothing. In 1264, after 4 bitter years, Arik Berk finally rode into his brother's camp and surrendered. Kublai spared his brother's life, but the wound between them never truly healed before Arik Berk's own death soon after. Kublai had won the throne, but the Great Civil War had cost the empire something it could never fully recover. The distant Khanates of Persia, of the Russian steppe, of Central Asia, had watched two great Khans go to war. They no longer felt bound to obey a great Khan who had seized his throne through civil war rather than consensus. One by one, the great Khanates began to act as their own independent kingdoms, loyal to Kublai in name alone. The single, unified Mongol empire that Genghis Khan had built was quietly, permanently coming apart at the seams. Kublai now ruled the greatest and richest portion of it all, but he was no longer truly Great Khan of everyone. And so, with the wider empire slipping from his grasp, Kublai turned his full attention toward the throne he could still master, China. In 1271, Kublai made a decision that shocked traditionalist Mongols to their very core. He declared the founding of an entirely new dynasty to rule China and gave it a name, the Yuan. The name meant origin, drawn from an ancient Chinese classic, a deliberate signal that this was a new beginning. No Mongol ruler before him had ever claimed a true Chinese dynastic name. Kublai was not just conquering China, he was becoming its emperor. He commissioned an entirely new capital city, built from the ground up, and named it Dadu, the great capital. Broad avenues, towering palace walls, and grand temples rose where empty land had stood before. Modern Beijing was born. Kublai ruled from Dadu as both Mongol Great Khan and Chinese Son of Heaven, a single man wearing two very different crowns. His own Mongol traditionalists grumbled that their Khan was vanishing into silk robes and Chinese ceremony. But Kublai understood the truth better than any of them. To rule China, he first had to become undeniably Chinese in the eyes of his new subjects. Even with a throne and a dazzling new capital, one enormous task remained unfinished. The stubborn southern Song still refused to bow. The key to all of southern China was a single, seemingly unbreakable fortress city, Xiangyang. Guarding two great rivers, Xiangyang had withstood every Mongol assault for years, resupplied endlessly by boat. Kublai's own engineers had failed again and again to breach its legendary walls. So the great Khan reached far beyond his own borders and summoned engineers from the distant Islamic world. They built a devastating new weapon, a massive counterweight trebuchet capable of hurling stones the weight of a man. When the first massive stone struck Xiangyang's walls, the very earth seemed to shake with the impact. After years of stubborn defiance, the terrified defenders of Xiangyang finally surrendered within days. The gateway to all of southern China now stood wide open before the Mongol armies. With Xiangyang broken, Kublai's armies swept south with terrifying speed, city after city falling before them. The Song court and its child emperor fled from city to city, always one desperate step ahead of the advancing enemy. Finally, in 1279, the last remnant of the Song dynasty made its final desperate stand at a place called Yemen. A massive naval battle erupted upon the open sea, the last free fragment of a once mighty Chinese empire fighting for its life. When defeat became inevitable, a loyal minister made a final, heartbreaking choice rather than surrender the child emperor. He carried the boy emperor into the waves, and together they vanished beneath the water, refusing capture. With that single tragic act, the Song dynasty, which had ruled parts of China for 3 centuries, was finally truly over. For the first time in history, the whole of China lay united under a single ruler, and that ruler was a Mongol. With all of China finally his, Kublai built one of the most magnificent courts the world had ever witnessed. Traders, scholars, and travelers from across the known world made the long journey to see it with their own eyes. Among them, around the year 1275, came a young Venetian merchant named Marco Polo. He would later write of feasts with thousands of guests, of paper money, of coal burned for heat, wonders unknown in Europe. Kublai, unlike so many rulers of his age, welcomed faiths of every kind within his court and empire. Buddhist monks debated freely alongside Muslim astronomers, Christian priests, and Confucian scholars. He employed foreigners of every origin in his government, trusting outsiders more than he trusted the conquered Chinese elite. It was, for a brief shining moment, one of the most open and cosmopolitan empires the world had ever known. And yet, even at the very height of his glory, Kublai's ambitions were about to reach dangerously beyond his grasp. Across the narrow sea lay a proud island nation that had never once bowed to any foreign emperor: Japan. Kublai sent envoys demanding tribute and submission. Japan's warriors answered by executing the messengers. Furious at the insult, Kublai launched a massive invasion fleet across the sea in the year 1274. The invasion force landed and fought its way onto Japanese shores, clashing fiercely with the fierce samurai defenders. But as the fleet lingered near the coast, a sudden violent typhoon rose from the sea and shattered it utterly. Thousands of Mongol soldiers drowned in the churning waves. The invasion collapsed in ruin and retreat. Furious and humiliated, Kublai tried again 7 years later, in 1281, with an even larger invasion force. Once again, as the massive fleet gathered near Japan's shores, a devastating typhoon rose without warning from the deep. The Japanese would call that storm the kamikaze, the divine wind sent by the gods themselves to protect their sacred island. Twice humiliated by the sea, Kublai turned his ambitions toward the warm, dense jungles to the south instead. He sent armies against the kingdom of Champa along the coast of what is now Vietnam, hoping for an easier conquest. Then he turned toward D-stroke letter 1E A1 IV I letter 1E C7T itself, the fierce and stubborn Vietnamese kingdom to its north. The Vietnamese, led by their brilliant general TR letter 1E7N Hung D-stroke letter 1E A1 had already broken one Mongol invasion years before. Now they used the same deadly tactics again, burning their own capital rather than defending it, and waiting. They let the jungle, the heat, and the endless guerrilla ambushes exhaust the invading Mongol army over long months. Then, at the B letter 1E A1CH, D-stroke letter 1EB1NG river, the Vietnamese repeated a devastating trick used against invaders centuries before. Iron-tipped stakes hidden beneath the river tore through the hulls of the retreating Mongol fleet at the worst possible moment. For the third time in his reign, Kublai's ambitions had sailed far beyond what his empire could actually conquer. Through every triumph and every failure, one person had remained constant at Kublai's side: his beloved wife, Chabai. She was fiercely intelligent, deeply trusted, and unafraid to challenge her husband's judgment when she believed him wrong. She had guided the design of Mongol dress, adapted for riding, and quietly shaped policy from behind the throne. In 1281, Chabai died, and something in Kublai seemed to break that never fully mended again. His favorite son, the thoughtful and gentle Xiangyang, had been carefully groomed as his chosen heir for years. Xiangyang was everything Kublai hoped his successor would be: wise, calm, and deeply respected by Chinese and Mongol alike. Then in 1285, only 4 years after his mother's death, Xiangyang himself fell ill and died. The great emperor who had conquered a civilization now found himself utterly unable to conquer his own grief. In the years that followed, Kublai began to change in ways that alarmed everyone who had once known him. He turned more and more toward food and drink, seeking any comfort he could find against the emptiness inside him. His once lean, capable body grew heavy and swollen, plagued increasingly by gout and painful joints. He grew distant from the court he had once ruled with such sharp, careful attention. Officials whispered that the brilliant, curious young prince they remembered seemed to be disappearing into an old, wounded man. Ambitious military campaigns still occasionally flared, but the fire and precision of his younger years had visibly dimmed. The empire itself remained vast, wealthy, and largely at peace, but its aging ruler was quietly, visibly fading. In February of the year 1294, Kublai Khan grandson of Genghis Khan, emperor of the Yuan dynasty, finally died. He was 79 years old, having ruled longer and achieved more than almost any conqueror in human history. He was buried, as Mongol tradition demanded, in a secret unmarked location, his grave hidden from the world forever. His grandson, Temur, inherited the dragon throne, but never quite matched the vision or brilliance of Kublai himself. The Yuan dynasty Kublai had built with such care would only last a little less than a century after his death. Rebellion, famine, and growing resentment would eventually rise against Mongol rule, just as it always does against empire. In time, a peasant-born rebel named Xiangyang would rise up and finally drive the Yuan dynasty from China forever. But that, as they say, is an entirely different story for another night beside this very fire. What remains certain is this: Kublai Khan was the only Mongol ever to conquer the whole of China, and the only one wise enough to become its emperor rather than merely its destroyer. The grandson, who was born to burn an empire down, instead chose, against every instinct of his bloodline, to build one instead.